Candidate form for District 1, Board of Supervisors. I'm Elizabeth Leslie Gassaway and I'll be your moderator tonight. So let's go over a few of the election-related items first. As you well know, there's a March 5th election coming up, about 20 days or so. You should all have received a ballot in the mail. Every registered voter in California will receive a vote-by-mail ballot. You can vote in many ways in El Dorado County. You can vote in person, you can vote at a vote center, you can vote at the election office, or you can put your ballot in the mail. It does not require a stamp as long as it's postmarked on or before Election Day. If you have any questions about voter registration, come see one of the League volunteers after. We're happy to help you. Also, you can use the League's online nonpartisan voter guide called Vote 411. You go to vote411.org, you can enter your address and view what's on your ballot. So with that, let's get started here. We'd like to go over the rules of the form first. We'll be starting our opening statements in reverse alpha order. And each of the opening statements, the candidates are allowed 2 minutes. They're allowed a minute and a half for the responses to questions, and then 2 minutes for their closing statements. Also, a note about the questions. We have so many questions, it's very exciting. It'll be unlikely we get to all of them today, but we will do our very best to get all of the questions answered. We do reserve the right to combine like questions so we can get to as many as possible. We also received questions from the public via email, and none of the candidates have seen these questions prior to tonight. Okay, and with that, I'd like to also point out our timer. Ruth, can you raise your hand? And Ruth will be counting down for you so you know how much time you'll have. She'll give you a 1 minute, a 30-second, and a 15-second, and then stop. Hopefully in the right order.
Don't be nervous.
We're also always looking for members. We'll be doing quite a few more of these forums in the fall, so please pick up a flyer on your way out and think about joining the League. And with that, I'd like to introduce our candidates running for District 1 Board of Supervisors. We have Linda Campbell, Greg Ferraro, and Margaret Fortune. And for these opening statements, as we are starting in reverse alpha order, that means, Margaret, you're going first. So Margaret, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Well, I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Margaret Fortune, and when my wife is here, Annette, go ahead and wave your hand like you just, there we go, hands in the air like you just don't care. When we moved to El Dorado Hills, I was so excited. I don't know if you guys watched the Jeffersons growing up, but I sang that song, Moving On Up, as we came to our dream home. It really felt like we had arrived. And we still feel that way. We've lived here for a decade, and we love our community. And I've knocked on thousands of doors in this campaign, which has been a real joy. And there are so many others in El Dorado Hills, our neighbors, who love this community. And that's what we all have in common. We chose it. We chose this community. This is a community that was formed in 1960. So it's young enough for people to remember what it was when it started. That means that we are at a real turning point now as we select new leadership for District 1. And the question is, who's ready for that turning point? I'm a candidate who has 29 years of experience serving in the public sector. I've been chair of major boards. I've been chair of major boards in the state of California, including the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and served for 8 years on the CSU Board of Trustees. For all of you who were born in the CSU, I likely chose your college president at some time, or the chancellor of the system. I am looking forward to having a robust conversation. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this forum together. I want to continue to serve, and what's important to me is open space, and many of the issues that are important to you. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you. Greg, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Greg Ferraro, and I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's event I'd like to thank Margaret and Linda and the audience for your participation. This is an incredible turnout. El Dorado County and El Dorado Hills is an incredible place to live, work, recreate, and raise a family. And I am running for one reason and one reason only, to maintain the greatness of our county. I do not want the issues and the policies and the crime and the homelessness that is infecting our big cities to come up into our county. We have an incredible county, and I want to keep it this way. My wife Rita and I moved here in 2007, almost 17 years ago, with our 3 kids. All of our kids went to our local schools and graduated from Oak Ridge High School. I was very fortunate to be very involved in their lives when they were young. I was a team manager for Boys Team Charity. I coached all of their youth sports. I coached youth lacrosse, junior mountain biking, Little League baseball, and I coached CSD basketball in the gymnasium right next door to where we are tonight. So my ties to this community run very deep. I also served our community during my 28-year career with the California Highway Patrol. In fact, I started the local office that patrolled El Dorado Hills back in 2009. Since retiring from the CHP as a captain, I have become a small business owner with my wife. We own a company called Sierra Laundry with 2 locations in El Dorado County. We built our location in the town center in 2020, and I've been active in the small business community ever since. I know I have a unique combination of professional experience, small business ownership, and community involvement that will make me an ideal candidate for supervisor, and I would really be honored to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Linda, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi everyone, I'm Linda Campbell. I have lived in Governor's Village, actually right across the street. It was super convenient to get here for 20 years now. My husband and I have 3 adult children. They all graduated from Oak Ridge. I have 4 grandchildren, 2 of which are currently attending schools also in this area. So I work in the private sector. I've never worked in a government agency. But I've certainly been a lot more active, understanding some of the things about government and how it's working. And the best way that it works is with all of us. It's important to remember that we are the government, and people should be doing the things that we request for them to do as a representative. That's the reason I'm running. The only reason I'm running is because the people want to have their voice heard. I've sat in a lot of different meetings over the last few years where people are trying to get information out or try to get their elected officials to act on things, and they're met with silence, or they're met with no kind of response whatsoever. I think that's what has created a lot of anxiety about the things that are going on in our area. There's not information available for people to be able to know what's going on, how to be involved, and how to get engaged. I have worked in the private sector, like I said, over 25 years in the technology industry. So I have a lot of skills in regards to data analysis. I have the ability to work through data center planning, which is kind of a lot like real estate planning when it comes to looking at diagrams and outlines and things like that. So I think that that private sector perspective gives me an advantage going in and saying, let's try to do something different so we can reclaim our county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, this first question, Linda, you're going to start for your response, and you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to this question. The general plan will soon be entering the revision phase after 20 years. District 1 has seen the largest impact of growth. What would you keep, and what do you think needs changing?
I think it's definitely worthwhile to be able to revisit it, because unfortunately over the many years there's been a lot of changes made by other supervisors that has negatively impacted our area. So I do think that we need to reevaluate some of the things that are going on and make sure that we have a voice in saying what types of things we want to have where. So dealing with the zoning, but then also dealing with the land use. And then beyond that, also making sure that some of the other elements aren't going to be overly restrictive on us. So some of the safety plan, it sounds good to have safety plan updates, but in reality, if it's coming and saying, you need to do this without any guarantee that it's really going to protect us, then I think it puts an undue burden on us as taxpayers. I don't think we should be implementing anything that's going to potentially increase our taxes. And I definitely want to make sure that people still have an opportunity to be able to choose what they're going to have in the plan, choose how the landscape they want to have look, and choose the elements that they want to maintain in our county.
Thank you. Greg, you have 1.5 minutes to respond. I can. The general plan will soon be entering the revision phase after 20 years. District 1 has seen the largest impact of growth. What would you keep and what do you think needs changing?
Well, yeah, our general plan was formed and adopted by our voters back in 2005. So a lot has changed in the last 20 years. The authors, El Dorado Hills is identified as a community region. El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, Diamond Springs, Placerville, and that is where the authors of the general plan intended all of the growth to go, and in hindsight, all of the tax revenue to come from. So we're running out of room to grow down here, so that's going to have to change. Also, the population density, which was identified for El Dorado Hills, is 65,000 people. We currently have just over 50,000 people, so we're quickly approaching that also. A couple things I'd like to see changed in the housing element. We have a lot of state mandates required, which the state is mandating a lot of requirements and bypassing local authority. And I wish we could change that. I don't think it's going to be possible because we're dealing with the state of California. One other thing I'd like to increase or promote more is in our Parks and Rec element, it talks about stimulating tourism. And we have an incredible region on the western slopes of our wineries and our whitewater rafting, our Apple Hill, and I would like to stimulate tourism and give people more options where they can spend the night and lodge on the western slope of El Dorado County. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret, you have 1.5 minutes to respond.
One of the things I mentioned is that we're at an inflection point. And I believe that's true because we've gone through this phase of rapid development. And we don't have to imagine what runaway development looks like. We just have to look south of 50 to what's happening in Folsom. And I think that because we no longer have to use our imagination around those things, people in El Dorado Hills are understandably nervous about that type of development happening here. I think that it's time for us to take a step back and, as a community, decide what our vision is. We have about 50,000 residents. A similarly situated community in terms of population would be the city of San Luis Obispo. The two cities that are in El Dorado County, South Lake Tahoe has 21,000 residents, and Placerville has 11,000. So we are a going concern, and although it was the vision of the general plan to have the growth happen here, now you have 40,000 or 50,000 residents who have a point of view. I think the residents of El Dorado Hills in District 1 are very smart. People are at the top of their professions and bring a lot of skills to the conversation. And I think that as we have the conversation about the next iteration of the general plan, it's going to be very important to engage the neighbors in a serious way.
Thank you. The next question will start with Greg. Should El Dorado Hills become a city? Why or why not?
So, part of my campaign, I've been walking neighborhoods and introducing myself to thousands of people since September, and I think we've reached over 8,500 homes so far. This is probably the most common question. They ask me, should we become a city? And my answer to them is, I don't know, how do you feel? Because really, it should be up to the voters. Personally, most people say that they're undecided, and that's really how I feel. I'm really on the fence. I see pros and cons. A pro would be we would have more control over our local development as a city. and we would have a seat at SACOG, which is the Sacramento Area County of Governments, which is the board that pretty much allocates or defines how much growth is going to go or be allotted to or expected to grow in cities and counties. A couple negatives would be the revenue neutrality, and that's how much are we going to have to make up, how much are we going to have to pay the county as a city to make up for the lost revenue that they're incurring, and it could possibly result in an additional layer of bureaucracy. Depending on who you talk to, that's very debated. I've met with the proponents of cityhood. I've met with the architects of the cities of Rancho Cordova and Elk Grove. And the promise that I've made to the proponents is, regardless of how I feel as a board member, even if I'm deathly opposed to it, I think it should go to the voters. And I would not stand in this way as a board member. It should go to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret, you have 1.5 minutes to respond.
So in 2004, the voters decided that El Dorado Hills should not be a city. That was 20 years ago. A lot of people worked hard on trying to persuade them otherwise. When you become a city, it's like getting a divorce from the county. You got to pay alimony. And now the alimony payments will be much higher. And some people say that it would be fiscally imprudent to be a city. But what we've given up in not becoming a city is that we've got a 5-member board in Placerville that makes land use decisions for us. And I think that our point of view would be more represented if we controlled our own land use. So going back to the previous question about the general plan, I think that what's most important to a lot of people around here is land conservation. The sweeping landscapes, the beautiful recreation, the reasons that we moved to El Dorado Hills. And the general plan, if you've read it, really expresses the vision for a community. Now, this is our opportunity, since we're not a city, and that decision was made in 2004, to revisit those. I'm currently on the Resource Conservation District Board, which is our county's elected land conservation board. So we do work around wildfire protection and prevention and rebuilding communities after wildfire, and I'd like to talk more about that.
Thank you. Linda.
Cityhood. There's a lot of different perspectives about it. Personally, I'm not a proponent. If people voted to do that as a supervisor, I certainly wouldn't stand in the way. I would make sure that there was enough information so that everybody was aware of what the implications were for it. Some of the reasons why I'm not really for it. I look at some of the cities around us. Folsom's a great example. Folsom originally said, we're not going to build south of 50. A few boards later, they're building south of 50. We have a little mini city example in our CSD. And if anybody's familiar with the CSD, that's got some challenges. Those challenges are going to be introduced no matter what. Placerville and South Lake Tahoe are both incorporated cities in our county. Both of them have increased their sales tax rates because they're trying to find ways to make revenue. So we can't continue to live on property taxes and still do things that we want within the government area. So it's going to be important to find out where we're going to be able to source revenue from, make sure it's sustainable, and then make sure that everybody understands kind of what they're getting into, but then also keeps track of it. We the people, we have to stay involved. We have to be aware of the people that we're electing. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret, this question will start with you. What are your priorities in dealing with infrastructure problems, roads, and traffic here in EDH?
Well, local government and the Board of Supervisors is very practical. It's the reason why I want to run and am running for this board. It's about the roads, it's about infrastructure. We have roads that were not designed to accommodate the number of people that are actually living in El Dorado Hills now. You can see that on Green Valley Road, you can see that on Bass Lake Road, you can see that on El Dorado Hills Boulevard. You can see even new roads like Saratoga that was created, and people who are trying to get out of their development can't make a left-hand turn. These issues are ones that we need to address. Oftentimes it's said we don't have enough money to do that. El Dorado Hills produces significant property taxes that contribute to our county government. So one of the very first priorities for me is going to be to fix the roads. In 4 years, you ought to be able to point to, and in local government you can, what is it that you did in particular? You should be able to see it. I would like to see our roads improve, and I would like to be the supervisor that works with the community and the county government and the Department of Transportation to make that happen. We have a lot of turnover in staff in El Dorado County government, but a ton of institutional memory in El Dorado Hills in this community that can help get those projects done.
Thank you. Linda,
Sorry, repeat it again?
what are your priorities in dealing with the infrastructure problems like roads and traffic in El Dorado Hills?
A lot of the problem with the roads is the developments that went in and the roads weren't factored in. A number of years ago, we had a couple measures. One of them expired and then another one came up that was specific to taking care of roadways when it comes to development projects. That hasn't been fully implemented within the county planning department. I think one of the best ways that we can try to implement and affect some change with it is to just incorporate a standard checklist for things. When there's development projects that are done, they're given conditions of approval. And we're finding that those conditions aren't being checked and validated as the developers continue. I think that needs to happen. In addition to that, we should have additional studies for things that are looking at stuff, and maybe we reevaluate some of the taxes that are being used for roads so we focus on it. Just a few weeks ago at the Board of Supervisors, the Department of Transportation gave their annual summary. I'm grateful to say that they selected Governor's Village because that's where I live, and we have some really tough roads. But the legacy infrastructure we have has to be cared for just as much as any new construction. So I think if we put more plans in place to be able to checkpoint, hold people accountable for things, and then make sure that we're factoring that in when anything new is developed, that will help.
Thank you. Greg,
I agree with Linda. I don't know if you know, but the county has just adopted a new strategic plan for the vision of the county. And they did a survey for I don't know how many residents, but guess what was number one issue? Traffic and roadway improvements was the number one issue, even over public safety. Back in 2015 or 16, the county abandoned the critical infrastructure plan for our county. And Linda's right, we voted on Measure E, which says if a development is going to be proposed for 5 or more homes, and that development is going to negatively affect traffic, the developer is required for making those improvements. And I totally agree with that. I don't understand why the developers are being forgiven. I don't know why the county should be responsible for picking up the slack for our developers. You look at Bass Lake. Rita and I just bought a house off of Bass Lake. And with the amount of traffic and homes up there, that road is clearly inferior. There's no turn pockets, there's no suicide lane. Back years ago, it was planned to be a 4-lane road. That's never going to happen. So I think we really need to make sure that we're going to be playing catch up now because we've forgiven the development that's already occurred. But moving forward, we really need to hold the developers accountable so we don't have issues like we're having at Bass Lake, Green Valley, and Latrobe Road. Thank you.
thank you. Linda, you'll answer this question first. What does protecting open space mean to you, and how would you go about it?
Protecting open space, I think all of us have enjoyed the outdoor aspects of our area and our county. And it's not just about developed parks. It's about wildlife. It's about oak trees. It's about foliage. It's about the things that are just truly natural in our area. A lot of the open space context over the last number of years had to do with the old golf course, which used to be a nice golf course. And then it was closed, and then it was let go to weeds and grasses. Ultimately, that was an entryway to our area. So I think it's important that we have distinctive features that we maintain and that we hold as part of our community, the way that we look. So I think that we have the ability to do that more as we're looking at development plans and making sure that they're factoring in that space. But then also looking at the other things that are there and saying maybe we just shouldn't build there. One great example is Pedregal. A lot of people have a real concern with that, which is just over across the street and between the apartment complexes over there. And that's a great area for wildlife, and it has natural oak trees in there. And so those are the types of things that I think that we should make a priority, and we have the ability. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg? There you go.
All right. Well, I am a huge proponent of open space. As my wife can attest, I've got a ton of different hobbies, and they all involve some type of activities outdoors. I spend countless hours in our hills and our trails, running, mountain biking. I truly appreciate our open space. We need to, when we talk about open space, and this is not going to be popular, we need to identify what's zoned open space versus what is zoned that's owned by someone that owns the property that has the right to build on it. And that doesn't mean I support them wanting to build on it, but we need to, it's a difficult decision because landowners have property rights, right? And we want to avoid lawsuits in our county and support growth. But we need to also maintain open space. But I think in all fairness, we need to really differentiate between what is zoned open space, which I will never vote to rezone. That's something that's zoned open space. Regarding the old golf course, that's a prime example. I am very happy that was zoned recreation. I am very happy that that is not going to be built on. It has been an eyesore since we moved here 17 years ago. I think we need to do it back where I mentioned in my last comment. Well, never mind. I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to note, some folks in the back are having trouble hearing, so I know it's awkwardly close, but let's try to put the microphone right up against your mouth, if that's possible, and see if that works better. Thank you for the note, audience. Okay, Margaret, go ahead.
The threat to open space comes from development and also wildfire in El Dorado County. I'm not funded by El Dorado County or El Dorado Hills developers or any real estate interests in El Dorado Hills. So I will bring an independent voice to this conversation about development in El Dorado Hills. What I think is important is that we, as a baseline, protect the open space that's in the current general plan. I am glad that the CSD, where we are in the pavilion of today, made the decision to buy a portion of the executive golf course. I think they paid about double of what that land would have been worth had Parker Development not put forward a plan to the County Board of Supervisors for it to have housing built on it, because that meant that the appraisal was based on not just the open land, but on the highest best use of that land with housing on it. But I think we couldn't count on the votes, even from this district, about whether or not that development would have been turned down. And therefore, the CSD had to buy that land, and now they have an option to buy more, and that's going to be at an expense. Wildfire is also a serious threat to open space. And I'd like to talk more about how my own home insurance was canceled because of our placement and proximity to wildfire.
Thank you. Okay, Greg, you're going to start. You'll be the first responder here. Can you please tell us about one or two major EDH issues from the past few years you were effectively involved in and how you helped?
Boy, well, probably the biggest issue that has affected El Dorado Hills in the last couple of years was the Amazon project, south on Latrobe. And although I don't live in Blackstone, I helped my friends who lived in Blackstone sharing the information that they wanted out on social media because we have a pretty big bandwidth of connections in El Dorado Hills. And so I helped them on social media share information and what they were fighting for to try to stop that from happening. Trying to think anything else. Boy, can we go back like 8 years?
Sure.
No. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
So in 2019, my home insurance was canceled. I have the notice here. It says, let's see, the reason is the location is unduly exposed to ember fallout, smoke and fire from wildland fuels, exacerbated by vegetation on the property with no opportunity for effective mitigation. I was just at the door with a neighbor who said that her home insurance had been canceled. So this is still going on, and the only prospect for her of getting new home insurance will likely be to pay double what she was paying before. So the way I decided to get involved, that impacts El Dorado Hills and all of El Dorado County, is on the Resource Conservation District Board. What we do is we clear the fuel from public and private lands on the land alongside roadsides that cause wildfire. And we also get involved in rebuilding communities that have been impacted by catastrophic wildfire. While this may seem to be an issue that impacts Grizzly Flats more than it does El Dorado Hills, the reality of this insurance being canceled means it's our problem too. In addition, if there was wildfire in El Dorado Hills, the condition of our roads would likely leave many of us trapped, which is what happened in Paradise. I was a part of the relief effort there, so I know.
Thank you. Linda?
One thing, a number of years when some of the redistricting was done, that benefits us. I provided some feedback and interaction on that with the supervisors. One project that I have been connected with was Open Space EDH, which was the fight for the old golf course. So as part of that, I kind of dug into some of the development plans, things like that, participated in discussions, was part of the feedback into the Planning Commission that eventually had them basically deny it or not approve it towards the Board of Supervisors in 2022. Even most recently, as a follow-on from that, there was an item that came up on the consent agenda for the Board of Supervisors where there was a contract being done for an outside company for EIR to be redone. So that I evaluated and found that actually the Board of Supervisors didn't have a consent calendar policy, which now they've corrected that partially. And then most recently, actually, I brought it up before as part of the general plan, the safety element. There's updates being done at the Board of Supervisors, and I provided feedback into that as well, which goes to a lot of the fire safety, which, as Margaret mentioned, is important to us because that's needed when it comes to our insurance and things like that.
Thank you. Margaret, you'll answer first for this question. Our community has experienced a spike in crime in the last few years. How can you as a supervisor impact public safety in our county?
I think I can impact public safety by supporting public safety. Our law enforcement, including our sheriff's department, is a part of county government. And so I support public safety, and another part of public safety are aware citizens. And I think that we are a very engaged community when it comes to our involvement in this community, the protection of our students in our schools. And as somebody who is an educator, I have founded 12 schools from preschool to 12th grade. We work very closely with law enforcement in schools. Schools and law enforcement are partners to keep children and families safe. So I have a particular sensitivity to that issue and look forward to promoting it as a supervisor.
Thank you. Linda?
I think some of the challenges when it comes to safety, it's personal. You can't change the heart of someone that is trying to do something that is negatively impacting you. But you can connect together with other people, and you can build community and make sure that you're watching out for each other. I think that's one thing actually that I really love about our neighborhood and other neighborhoods that I've seen. People are willing to do that. The more we watch out for each other, the more that we can potentially try to preempt some of the things and make it seem like it's not quite a good area to come and do bad stuff in. But even more than that, we can reach out to our neighbors and we can understand things that are going on with them, and we can support them in the middle of it. I do support our law enforcement locally, but they can't be here for everything. And so it's time to look at what we can do and then make improvements that way as feedback to our community. And I'll give an example. We can have stop signs up and people still won't stop at stop signs. So it's all about our individual choices and then just trying to gather together more and get feedback and talk to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, this question hits home with me. I spent 28 years with California Highway Patrol, worked in 10 different counties throughout the state, and ran the office that protected all of us for 2 years back in 2009 and 2010. And it's my number one priority as a supervisor. I don't want the crime coming up and invading our county. And if you read the Mountain Democrat or talk to neighbors, you're going to find that crime is increasing in El Dorado Hills. Just look at Blackstone. Last month they had, I think, 8 burglaries. And it was all in the middle, early evening, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So, and the state is handcuffing also with the passage of Prop 47, which, if you don't know, essentially legalized narcotics and theft. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to support our law enforcement. I'm going to support their policies, the Sheriff's Department, the Probation Department, and our District Attorney. And I'm going to hold them accountable for doing their jobs and keeping us safe. I'm going to make sure and do everything I possibly can to make sure that their funding does not get dropped. Because we need to, without public safety, we have nothing. I've got all of the county's law enforcement. In fact, law enforcement endorsements, the sheriff, the district attorney, the California Station of Highway Patrolmen, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, and just tonight I received the Probation Officers Association's endorsement. Public safety is a fragile privilege that can be taken away from us at any time. So we need to be very strong on those endeavors on keeping us safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, you'll start with this question. How do you feel about more affordable housing in EDH, and do you think that ADUs are the answer?
I think that affordable housing is a term that is thrown around a little too much without a lot of substance and clarification to it. Something that may seem affordable to me is not affordable to someone else. So if we start thinking of, can we have low or very low income type of housing? In reality, when it comes down to it, we as the county are not building homes. The developers build homes. They're going to want to base it on medium area income. That's why we have the types of homes and things that we do. Is it impossible to get other things in? No, but I also don't know any developers that are altruistic and unselfish and just want to give people low-income housing. So I think it's about being reasonable with it. I do like the ADU option. And in fact, in walking neighborhoods, I've seen a number of those, and they're very tasteful. And I think that gives an opportunity, if we think of, you could do it as a rental place, or you could do it as like almost a family kind of homestead. I have parents in Arizona that are aging. If I had the opportunity to have had an ADU and brought them out here, if it wouldn't have separated them, I would have. Those are good options, and then we can potentially have our families closer to each other, but still removed enough that we don't get on each other's nerves too much.
Thank you.
Point of information, would you tell us what an ADU is by definition?
Additional dwelling unit?
Accessory
dwelling unit.
It's a tiny home.
Like a mother-in-law unit, so to speak, some people call them that.
Is that the legal definition?
Yes. Okay, Greg.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, I am walking neighborhoods daily, and one complaint I get from people is they're saying, our kids graduated from high school, went on to college, and they can't afford to move back here. And so we need more affordable housing. I hear that we need more affordable housing for seniors also. We're going to have a balance between affordable housing and the no growth that people don't want to grow, because affordable housing is going to be more higher density or townhomes or apartments or perhaps ADUs. So we're going to have to balance that. ADUs could be an option, and I definitely support their use if it is on a large enough parcel. I don't think we want to put ADUs on quarter-acre parcels. But on any type of larger parcel, absolutely. And I know the county is doing a job where they're providing free building plans that are free for people up in Grizzly Flat to build ADUs on. One thing we're going to need to do is the state is mandating so much affordable housing for our local jurisdictions, cities and counties. And in order to avoid the state coming in and saying, hey, we're going to force you to build affordable housing neighborhood in a particular neighborhood that we might not have control over, we're going to have to incorporate affordable housing in all of our future development and make that a requirement of our developers to include some affordable housing element in their development plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret.
ADUs are not going to solve the affordable housing crisis in El Dorado County. Every other local government is following the rules. It says that 20% of any development is supposed to be affordable. I think that some people get the misimpression that affordable housing means that we're going to put Section 8 housing on the golf course. That's not what it is. I think we do have an obligation, and in fact our housing element says as much, that we need more affordable housing. I think I want to also use this as an opportunity to talk about homelessness in El Dorado County. And I'm intentionally speaking more broadly than just El Dorado Hills because this is a countywide issue. We have about 491 in the last count homeless people living in El Dorado County. And having spoken to those that work with people who are homeless, they say when it comes to referring them after the Navigator Center, there's no place to refer them to in terms of housing. Other areas would look at 491 people and say, that's a problem we can solve. And I think it is. And if I'm the next supervisor, I will convene all those that are working in this area of homelessness and homeless services on a regular basis so that we can get after solving that problem in our county.
Thank you. Greg, you'll answer this question first. How will you address the rising homelessness problem in our county?
If you've heard me speak, that is one of my priorities. I don't want the crime and the homelessness and the problems coming up the hill into El Dorado County. And Margaret's right, we have right around 500 homeless in our county, which compared to other jurisdictions is minuscule. A couple weeks ago, or last month, I rode along with our sheriff's homeless outreach team. And they provide enforcement. Well, first of all, we toured the county and showed me the issues with our county regarding homelessness. And we have a problem, but we don't want it to grow. And so we need to take a compassionate approach while utilizing our homeless outreach team to provide wraparound services. Most homeless, about 95%, are homeless because of narcotics, addiction, or mental illness. So we need to have a place. I don't know if the navigation center is the correct place, but we're going to have some type of a center. And I referenced the Springs Rescue Mission, which is in Colorado Springs. Actually, a high school friend of mine runs it. They have a very successful program, and I'm not going to have time to go into it. But a center with wraparound services to get people drug rehabilitation, mental health care, and to try to get them on their feet. The biggest challenge is to try to get them to realize that they can actually be helped, and they're deserving of getting helped. It is a priority of mine. I do not want to see tents all over our streets. And so I'm going to hold the Sheriff's Department accountable to make sure that they enforce the private and public property, private property rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
Well, part of the reason that I moved from Sacramento, I was born in Carmichael, which is a suburb of Sacramento. I went to high school out, and I lived as a teenager in Granite Bay, so on the other side of the lake, so I'm from this region. And it's been sad to see Sacramento deteriorate. I own a little cottage, and during the Great Recession, it wasn't uncommon to see people go down the middle of the street in Curtis Park, which was my Tony neighborhood, with a shopping cart. And I had the opportunity to talk to the mayor and the director of housing, and it was clear that there wasn't a plan for homelessness, and it has taken over. My hairstylist had to move her business because people defecated on the sidewalk in front of the door. There are encampments in front of affluent neighborhoods and low-income neighborhoods. It's a scary place to be now. But that comes from not having good planning. And I think that we have to be eyes wide open and embrace taking care of this problem. And I think that it's refreshing to hear that hopefully all the candidates in this race have that, for District 1, have that as a priority. Because that means that we will be one vote of the 5 that votes for action.
Thank you. Linda?
I think the idea of homelessness, like everything else, is multi-layered. So I do think it's important to make sure we have a focused area for families with children where they may need something transitional to get back up on their feet. I also think that there's a need for having things that are close to services for those that are dealing with mental illness or drug addictions. So they have the opportunity to get through it. I will say that one of the things, as Margaret mentioned earlier, sometimes they get done with the navigation center and they don't have a place to go. Maybe they don't have a place to go because they don't have good paying jobs. What about if we actually gave the opportunity for them, some of them, not to become homeless in the first place because they were able to work, they were able to make a living, and they were able to afford to stay where they were. People that live here become homeless, but they want to stay here because it's a great county. How about if we try to focus on the economic part of it to create job opportunities for people and maybe training so that they can learn a new skill and it can help them to move forward as they move into their next step. Homelessness should only be a short phase if needed at all, and we should give them opportunity to be able to move on and beyond that.
Thank you. Margaret, you'll be answering first. What is your plan to infuse additional income into the county?
I love this question. So For my schools, we decided, and I shared with you, open 12 schools. And we generally talk about our schools in terms of academic achievement in the students, but I grew this organization from a $2 million organization to a $52 million organization, from 14 employees to 460 employees. And we were recruited to the city of Oak Grove in order to build an 8-acre campus. They showed us the plans to the city and say, we want an educational institution here. And so we went in with our developer, who was Andre Agassi, the tennis player. That's what he does in his retirement, is he develops public charter schools, and built an 8-acre campus there. And my students and parents and families are enjoying it now. I think it's important that we go out and seek the type of businesses that we have. Now, one thing that we don't have, that cities have, is that they have economic development departments. And so they are situated to give businesses incentives to come and to their city. I think we should do the same for our county. And we know that people want to be here, right? Businesses want to be here. That's why Costco's knocking down the door because of AKT development. That's why Amazon, under the veil of secrecy, wanted to be here. Let's take that desire to be in El Dorado Hills and leverage it to actually have businesses that we desire to be here, that will generate sales taxes and make this even more robust community than we already are.
Thank you. Linda?
Some of the things that I think about it's kind of funny how our answers end up becoming the next question. So we should all be cautious on what we're saying. No. So one thing that I think would be great is to be able to get more trade-type schools in the area. And some of that doesn't necessarily have to be just from the Economic Development Department, because we do have one at the county. I don't find them very effective. But we as citizens can certainly be effective. And we can start pursuing some of the things that we know. A lot of people have said, I have kids that have gone to trade schools out in other areas like Roseville or down in Sacramento, stuff like that. Why don't we get together as a voice and say, hey, you school company, why don't you try to check out our area? Another thing that would be great is to be able to have opportunities for technology. Just a few weeks ago, Folsom got a contract with Samsung for an R&D division with 50 people to start. So those are the kinds of things that I think that we could leverage. As noted earlier, there's a lot of smart people up here, and there's a lot of ideas that we could reach out to companies and say, hey, can you check out our area? We can't promise anything, but at least we can let them know that there's interest. And then they can start to do the work to determine if it's a viable option.
Thank you. Greg?
I think that in order to make money as a county, we first need to look at ways to save money. And I would like to take a look at all of our county programs. And if there are programs that are not meeting their intended purposes, that they get eliminated. And we need to hold our departments accountable to be as efficient as they possibly can. In order to make money, I would like to promote tourism on the Western Slope. Like I mentioned earlier, we have Apple Hill, whitewater rafting, vibrant wine region, and places like Marshall Park. And people are going up there for the day, and they're probably driving down to Folsom and spending the night. So more lodging, or more lodging on the Western Slope, where people can spend the night, go to dinner, and spend their money in our county. We need to attract more businesses to our county and make it desirable for them to come. I know that the people up, the supervisors up the hill, they want to promote logging and mining, and those are great things. But we need more businesses in our area to generate tax dollars and stimulate small business and make it easier for a small business person to start. And by doing that, I would start by streamlining the permitting process for development or for their development or tenant improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, you'll answer this one first. How will you fix or improve the permitting process at our building department?
Someone's stacking the questions.
See, it's a recurring theme. So first of all, I think there's been a lot of reports, and in fact, a grand jury report last year just said that, or year and a half last year, said that there was a problem with the planning and building department, and there were a lot of complaints associated with it. It wasn't until this month that the planning department actually proposed a resolution to the board to try to do something about it. That's 7 or 8 months delay from the original report. I think that there needs to be more pressure on the building and planning organization to actually propose what they would have for an improvement, not wait around for a resolution saying, oh, we're going to do something. So a lot of it is about streamlining the work, making sure that there's clarity when people go in, that they understand exactly the steps that they're going to have to go through and what they can expect as a service from the county. I think that the county departments need to remember that they are services for the citizens, and anything that they can do to make them more efficient to operate and more clear in the requirements for people will go a long way in making sure that people have a much better experience when it comes to permitting.
Thank you. Greg?
This is a well-known problem, and I experienced it firsthand about 8 years ago when we built our first laundromat at Cameron Park, and I was the one responsible for pulling the permits. And our contractor said, hey, when you go up to building and planning, bring a book, because you're going to wait an hour or two before you're even seen. And without a doubt, every time I went up there, I waited an hour or two and read my book. Once I got to the window, the employees were incredible, and they took care of business. But it was clearly inefficient from the get-go. I've talked to friends and family members that build homes, especially up in Serrano, and the nightmares that they have with planning is taking them over a year to pull a permit. I have a friend of mine that owns a winery, and it's taken him over 17 months to get a permit for an improvement on his land. As Linda mentioned, last May there was a civil grand jury investigation on the planning and building department, and they came up and they found a number of findings and a number of recommendations. And I agree, if you read the report, I agree with every one of those findings and every one of the recommendations. That agency, or that department, is a public service agency, and they need to be not making life more difficult for people pulling permits. They need to be streamlining it. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
So getting a conditional use permit and or a building permit should not be the thing of nightmares. For a long time, El Dorado County has been an example of what not to do, like a textbook case of what not to do in terms of building and planning. I've dealt with a lot of building and planning departments because, I think my microphone's not. There you go. I've dealt with a lot of building and planning departments because I build schools from the ground up. And having delays and such is not unique to this department, but the severity of it is. The grand jury investigation focused on the following areas: mission statements, the permit process challenges, the roles and duties of the ombudsman, building inspections, home fire sprinkler inspections, performance measurements, and customer satisfaction. So it's top to bottom. And the concern is that the current County Board of Supervisors haven't been activists on this issue. Some of the recommendations from that grand jury report they accepted, and some of them they rejected. In my opinion, that's not really the action of a governance board that embraces the need for change. And so if I was elected to this office, I would be an activist board member, not overstepping the role of governance, because I understand that. I manage my own public board, but an activist for change.
Thank you. Okay, Margaret, you're going to answer first for this next question. If elected, what is your strategy for building consensus with other supervisors?
Relationships. I had an opportunity a month or so ago to go on a congressional visit with Supervisor Turnbull to an area in his district. Him and his role as a supervisor, he had arranged the visit, and me and my role as a director of the Resource Conservation District to go and visit Grizzly Flats with Congressman Kevin Kiley. We all have a role to play in the restoration of Grizzly Flats. And in that context, we were advocates for that community and that cause. I think that alliances can be formed with other board members, and we have to. District 1 is the only district that's 100% El Dorado Hills, but it's not 100% of El Dorado Hills. That means that we have to represent this district, and on any issue that we're interested in, we have to get 2 other votes to go with us. That means a lot of due diligence behind the scenes on working on issues. It means building alliances, it means building relationships, and it means finding common ground. And because local government are about these issues that we've talked about, the roads, housing, land use, these very tangible things that impact our daily lives, we have an opportunity to work collaboratively with our colleagues, and it's my hope to do so.
Thank you. Linda?
I agree. It's about relationships. It's about how we talk to each other, how we treat each other, making sure that we have the right areas of focus. Sometimes it seems like there's just so many things that come up that maybe aren't necessary. So some of it could be filtering some of that through. I think asking for more clarity from staff on some of the things that are being delivered would help. But also it's about people being willing to ask questions. As supervisors, they do ask questions, but they don't always get the answers. So to me, I think they should get that information before making a decision. I think having a new and different type of perspective coming in will help me ask different kinds of questions that maybe they haven't thought of. And then I'll listen to the questions that they have. And together we come up with a more robust picture of what we're approving and why. I've met with both Lori Parlin as well as Brooke Lane, and I think they both ultimately what we all want, and we want a better county. So it's about understanding and respecting the decisions and the ideas that are coming from the people from a district representative, and then incorporating that into the larger county.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, I will third down motion on relationships. It's about relationships. And having a career with the Highway Patrol, I got the job done. I had proven leadership, but I did it in a diplomatic way and maintained relationships in a positive way. Getting consensus is very important, and I think Margaret mentioned it, but El Dorado Hills is covered by 3 different district supervisors, District 1, District 4, and District 2. And so all 3 of us, it's important for all 3 of us to have a consensus to do what is best for El Dorado Hills. I don't look at it just as District 1, I look at El Dorado Hills holistically. But we can't collude, and there's laws to prevent that from happening. The Brown Act, we have to follow that. So, 3 of us can't get together and talk about what we want to do. That's against the law. So I think, having set expectations from the beginning and a consensus to do what is right and listening to the citizens of El Dorado Hills, all 3 of us, all 3 supervisors should be doing that. I think we can come up with a consensus to make the right decisions on behalf of El Dorado Hills. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, you'll start with the next question. What would you do to improve the seriously deficient mental health services in El Dorado County?
As I alluded to before, probably half of our homeless are there because of mental health issues. The state has been negligent on the mental health services that they used to provide, and that problem is permeating in local government or local jurisdictions. So we really need to work closely with the Health and Human Services Director and make sure that we have those services. as we mentioned earlier, we do not have a huge homeless problem yet. But there's people with mental health issues also that aren't homeless. And so with that, we have first 5 community centers, or first 5 community hubs. Each library has a community hub, I don't know if you're aware of it, that provides services to the public. And services to, for mental health issues are, they provide references and point people in the directions to go. And so it's definitely something I would like to focus on to improve, because it's such an important dilemma, and we need to rectify it. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
One of the things I think is important are that there are enough beds for those that are in crisis in mental health, and right now they're not. Marshall Hospital, I think, has a role to play in this, as does the county. I think our investment in mental health services is the bare minimum. We literally, at the county level, put in the bare minimum. You know, I have been a fiduciary of budgets. Our budget in the county is a little over $1 billion. When I was a trustee of the California State University, our budget was $12 billion. It's important to protect the resources for our most vulnerable populations. So, and I think that El Dorado County has shortchanged mental health services. So, and we are also entering in a time when we could be in a very tough fiscal position. You know, with the governor's office saying we're $39 billion in the hole, and the legislative analyst office saying that we're $68 billion in the hole. Usually it's Health and Human Services in local government that suffers when that happens. My hope is that we don't allow the further erosion of mental health services in our county, and I would protect that.
Thank you. Linda?
I think that government definitely has the opportunity to be able to provide services that are centralized and easy for people to access. I think that it should be a focus, and we should make sure that we're prioritizing the things that they're doing. Is the department really working on the things that they should be working on as a priority? Do we have the funding going the right direction? Are there things that we need to stop doing in one area so that we can fund another? I will say that I think some of my thoughts about mental health, because it has so many different aspects, a lot of it comes back to community too. Are we in touch with our neighbors? Are we in touch with our family members? Are we helping each other? Do we see somebody that seems a little down? Do we ask them to take a walk and get outside? Do we spend some time with them? I think that as our community, we can do a lot to just help people not feel lonely. That's something everybody can do. If we pay attention to each other, then maybe it won't get to a point where they need to go to a facility. Or maybe you can be in a position then to say, hey, you know what, maybe you need some additional help and assistance that's professional. How about I go with you? Those are the kinds of things that I think that we can do to improve mental health in our country.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with you, Margaret, for the next question. What is your position on Proposition 1, and how do you see it impacting our county?
Yeah, I'm a trained policy analyst. I went to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and learned how to do government for a living. One thing that you don't do is if you don't know an issue, you don't jump into it. And I really haven't studied Proposition 1 enough in order to offer an informed opinion, and so I'm not going to.
Thank you. Linda?
No, that's good. I will say that I think it's too much money, but it does go into kind of the mental health service type thing that I was just talking about. I think it's trying to put too too much onus on the government to resolve an issue that I don't think can just be solved with money and more regulation for things. So I also haven't totally looked at it, I've glanced at it, I haven't sent in my ballot yet, but those are just my initial thoughts from first glance and some of the information that I know so far.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, I'm with you, ladies. No, and I haven't voted on it also, but I do have a little bit of knowledge on it. And the state wants to generate a lot of money for mental health and homeless to remedy that. And I don't think the state has done a good job in that avenue now, currently. So I'm really not, I'm not in favor of providing more money to the state to just throw money at a problem with no solutions. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, you'll start with this next question. Specifically, what do you plan to do to mitigate fire danger in El Dorado Hills?
Fire danger. So it's interesting to think that we could potentially control it. I think we can certainly mitigate it. I think some of the debris mitigation removal things that the fire department has implemented are very helpful on empty properties and things like that. Some of the problem comes down to, again, the roads though. What do we have for roads if an evacuation needs to happen? Does everybody know an alternate evacuation route from their house? I think all of those things are the types of things that we could do to communicate information out and make sure that the public's aware. And if they have concerns, then we can make sure that there's information that they can reference. When it comes down to some of the general items, we do have oak wildlands too, right? And so to say, let's chop down all the trees also doesn't make sense. Shade is important, and of course things with wildlife. So I think a lot of it is our own awareness for things, being alert, being responsive, and then understanding what to do, having a plan in case of an emergency.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I have a pretty familiar with fire departments. I used to be a volunteer fire department when we lived, volunteer firefighter when we lived in Danville. And I've got a lot of friends in the business, and you can see by my endorsements, I've got a lot of fire chiefs who are endorsing me. So I can relate to them and appreciate what they do. I think as a county though, you look at the devastating wildfires we have had over the last 10 years, the Mosquito Fire, King Fire, and more recently, the Caldor Fire, and what we can do to prevent those. And we really need to put pressure with working on our congressmen and our senator and assembly member to put pressure on the state and the federal government to reduce the fire fuels. And there's a term for it, I'm drawing a blank, but forest management is very important to reduce the fire fuels and the ladder fuels, which are the first 10 or 15 feet of a tree. That's the step that catches on fire. So we need to be very aggressive in reducing that. We also have a county ordinance. It's a defensible space ordinance that is it's state mandated, but it's currently being altered and adopted. But it's going to require defensible space of 100 feet between or of any structure or any dwelling unit in the county. Margaret talked about fire insurance. It's a huge problem, and we need to facilitate. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I can. Specifically, what will you do to mitigate fire danger in El Dorado Hills?
So I recently sent to voters my plan for wildfire prevention. And one thing that we can do in El Dorado Hills is become a Firewise USA community. That means that we voluntarily take the steps that are spelled out in the Defensible Space Ordinance, similar steps to those, to protect the community against wildfire. That means hardscaping your homes. That means getting rid of the fuel that's, that is around the buildings. It can result in a decrease in home insurance, which usually is an incentive for people to take these actions even beyond government regulation. I think it's important that we lead with education on a grassroots level, and a lot of this is happening through our fire safe councils, and I support that. I would also support all existing local agencies that belong to El Dorado County's wildfire prevention and land conservation infrastructure to ensure long-term stability in terms of funding, staffing, and facilities and equipment. I would continue rebuilding communities and forests impacted by the Caldor fire, supporting reforestation and creating fuel breaks. The fuel breaks are important. That's actually what saved Pollock Pines. Those are the things we need to do in our community too.
Thank you. Greg, you answer first here. What is the county's strategic plan? And please give 2 items in the plan that resonate with you personally.
The strategic plan is the kind of the roadmap for the direction that the county is going to go into, or it's the roadmap for the county as they move forward. It was just adopted last month, a new one for 2024, and it talks about the vision, the goals, and the values for the county. And it's a living document, so it can be changed as time goes on. But I think the 2 topics that I am holding most closely, or I think they're most important, is safe and healthy communities, as public safety is my #1 priority, and a thriving economy. And we definitely need to take steps with the deficit that the state is going to, that they're experiencing. The deficit problems are going to trickle down to the counties, and we're going to have to come up with ways to thrive as a county and become self-sufficient as a county. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret.
You know what? I don't know that I'm fully prepared to answer that question. What's important to me is that, no matter who we elect in this election, we've had 8 years of leadership under the current supervisor. We all have a lot to learn. And I'm going to have a lot to learn. And what I'm not going to do is fake it. So it's a very specific question, and I don't know the answer yet, but I look forward to investigating it and finding out.
Thank you. Linda.
So the strategic plan to me is a little bit more operational, specific to the county offices. What it's supposed to do is support the general plan. I think the general plan should have a little bit more focus so that some of the things in there to safeguard us are implemented. When it comes to 2 items, you said 2 items? 2 items. I would say thriving economy, but also strategic innovation. I think having jobs is really important in our area. But then beyond that, we have to find ways to be able to move the county forward a little bit. So innovation and ideas, I think, are going to be really critical to try to move us on past the almost stagnant type of landscape that we have in some of our county offices. Have people come in with new ideas and new concepts, or even challenge some of the things that are there in such a way that's constructive and helps them realize, like, hey, I can think of something new. One of the things that was a problem identified was the track-it system in the building and planning department. I went and looked at the user guide, and they actually have the option to be able to do checklists. But yet when I go into track it, I don't necessarily see that. Something as simple as that to just encourage, like, hey, this is available. Let's research it more and implement it to be helpful.
Thank you. Margaret, you'll answer this question first. Because I am concerned about political action money in our elections, Will you speak about your largest donor and explain how that will influence your decisions when elected?
Well, one of my largest donors is my mom. Another significant, the thing is that people, we have campaign contributions at $5,500. And for anybody who has an interest in an item that comes before the board, the limit is 250, otherwise the board for a year can't vote on what you're going to put forth. I think the reason why you have campaign contribution limits like this is because the idea is good governance. You know, I've been somebody in government for 29 years, serving in boards that, under Government Code 1090, which is the Conflict of Interest Code. Boards governed by sunshine laws like Bagley-Keene and the Brown Act. Good governance dictates that, because you gave a campaign contribution doesn't mean that you're going to get a favor on the other end. That's not what it means. It means that you participated in that way up to your legal limit, and the person that you supported is responsible for being fair, period. And that's my position. I am going to keep an open mind. I'm going to keep an open door. I'm going to listen to people. I'm somebody who's known for solving big problems.
Thank you. Linda?
My largest donor was my mother-in-law. And she lives in Nevada, so she does have influence, but not in how I vote. And then the second largest donor was me. And then everybody else, whatever people are willing to contribute, that's what I've received and I welcome. And I've, I think, done pretty well budgeting with what I have to be able to do. So I think that some of the challenge is just making sure that there's information out, that there's information available, understanding that, you know, the donations aren't what makes us who we are. So, thank you.
Thank you. Greg?
Repeat it one more time, please.
Because I am concerned about PAC money in our elections, will you speak about your largest donor and explain how that will influence your decision when elected?
Yeah, I think I have about 4 large donors, 4 or 5. And I don't know how it happens, but I've got some rich friends. And all but one live in El Dorado Hills. And they're friends of mine. And when I told them, one of them I told I was going to run for supervisor, and he said, let me know how much you need. It's a guy I ski with, bike ride with. His business partner matched his donation. Another gentleman I met with, and this is all public information. I'm not going to mention their names, but you can look it up. I introduced myself. He didn't want to have anything to do with the county. He does business in our county. He's disgusted with the way the county operates. And he goes, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I told him about my values and where I was running. He goes, I'm all in. My dad's back there. He was pretty close to a max donor. And I have a, dad, raise your hand. Sleeping. And a friend of mine from high school who's an extremely wealthy, successful businessman. I think he has maxed out the donation as well. I have not taken any political action money. In fact, I passed up endorsement opportunities with our Chamber of Commerce's because they have developers on their PAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, you'll answer this one first. How will you engage with individuals or groups that see things differently than you or that perceive you have to have a bias?
So, part of my commitment is, and this has been, since I announced my candidacy back in June, this has been a learning endeavor. And I've met with a lot of people, a lot of department heads, people on boards. Some of you in this room that are here tonight, I've met and I seek your advice. And I am a sponge. I'm an open book and I want to learn. this job is going to take, there's a ton of institutional knowledge that goes with it. And none of us know it all. None of us have done this before. And so I'm going to listen to people. In fact, I was at a meeting this morning with a group of gentlemen, and I was thinking to myself, you know, when I'm in my decision-making process as a supervisor, I'm going to reach out to groups like this and get their input from people. I have never been, if you ask the people, you know, that work for me on the California Highway Patrol, I hold the values of the people that work for me. I think that's more important than the people I work for, because the people who work for me respect me, because it was never my way or the highway, and I was always open to suggestions. And the bottom line is, I want to represent you, and I want to do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
Elizabeth, I didn't hear the last word of the question, so can you repeat it?
Sure. How will you engage with individuals or groups that see things differently than you, or that you perceive to have bias?
Oh, thank you. I think it's so important to find common ground. We're not all going to agree on everything. I think that's a given. We all have the right to our own perspective. I mean, that's the freedom that we have as citizens of this country. And aren't we glad for it? In so many places, you're not entitled to have your own opinion. But this work is about finding collaborations and opportunities to find common ground. I look forward to getting out to our many established groups. I mean, you know, some that are, you know, just off the top of my head, our El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee, which has been around since 1981, our El Dorado Hills Community Council. You know, these are places where we go for information, and even if we disagree on the issues, being able to come together and convene and talk about the issues in substantive ways, I think is a part of the work. I think we are well situated to do the work together, even if there are issues and flashpoints that we disagree on. That's a commitment that I have as a county supervisor to this community. The other thing I'll say about El Dorado Hills is this is a place where people are involved. When you're working side by side to clean up the creek, you have that in common, even if some of your views differ.
Thank you. Linda?
I am just naturally pretty open to everyone. I don't assume anything before somebody starts talking to me. I've talked with people all over the area. I've connected with individuals. We all have some different ideas, but at least we're willing to talk about it. And I think I do that in my workplace as well. I work with people globally, and I guarantee you we all have different ideas. But we find ways to come together, and we leverage each other's skills, and we leverage each other's knowledge, and because of that, we become better. So I don't push anybody away because they think different than me. Instead, I'm just open to realizing that they may think away and I may think away, but on a different topic, maybe we totally come together. That doesn't make them any less important or significant, and they're definitely still worth my time.
Thank you. Margaret, you'll answer this question first. How many Planning Commission meetings have you attended, and which ordinance is on the Commission's agenda next week?
That sounds like a gotcha question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to, you know, listen, this is about who you think will be best at governing. And I'm somebody who knows how to govern. We all know how to prepare for the issues. Knowing what's on next week's agenda does not signal your expertise or preparation to be a supervisor. When I was in graduate school, I remember so distinctly a project we were given where we had to sit down in front of the Massachusetts Director of Health and Human Services with a bunch of binders and figure out the answer to a policy that he had written. That's my training, to find the needle in the haystack. That's what prepares me to be the next supervisor, and why you should have confidence in my leadership.
Thank you. Linda?
So I've attended a number of the Planning Commission meetings. As I mentioned earlier, the open space one where thankfully they all voted not to move the project forward, that was a nice meeting. Everybody was very happy at the end of that meeting. Sometimes I can't always attend, but I will still watch the recordings afterwards. I do try to check the agendas because there's always something coming up. I think the next one had something about cell tower standards, I believe. And one reason that I remember it too is because there's actually something about the oak tree ordinance that had been amended before. Recently I found that there was a lawsuit that was settled because of the changes that were done for the oak tree ordinance. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do to incorporate that into any new changes.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, the Planning Commission is made up of 5 members, all representing a different district in the county, and they either meet once or twice a month to discuss any type of zoning amendment to our subdivision, amongst other things. I have never been to a Planning Commission meeting, but I can assure you that I will appoint, I'm going to be able to, the supervisors, whoever wins gets to appoint a planning commissioner, and that planning commissioner is going to be have very in-depth knowledge of our planning department and how that works, and our general plan and Measure E. I will say that since I started my campaign in June, I've been to just about every APAC meeting, which occurs once a month here, and just about every community council meeting that takes place in El Dorado Hills, and I've been the only one to show up to the Board of Supervisors meetings. Thank you.
Linda, you'll start first for this question. What is your vision for El Dorado Hills?
My campaign statement or idea when I first came up with it was twofold: rural character and vibrant community. Rural character was a term that came out of the general plan because I think that one of the most important things to people is in fact what we're doing with our land. What do we have opportunity for? But the second part of that is vibrant community. And actually that ended up being part of the strategic plan as well. But my vision is to find ways to bring people together, to help you be part of the government process again. I don't think any of you here want to elect a person and then never hear from them again. I can't make decisions unless they're coming from you and I get feedback. You can't make decisions if there's not enough information or clarity on things so that you can provide knowledgeable feedback. What I would love to be able to do is be able to translate information that's coming from different areas of the county so that you have more information to be able to speak to me on, and then I truly take back your feedback and I take back your vote and we find ways to make things work. I think that's going to help everybody feel like they're truly part of, have say in where they live.
Thank you. Greg?
My vision is kind of twofold. On one hand, I want to stay the same, and on the other hand, I want to advance. When it comes to public safety and homelessness, if we can get through 4 years and our crime rates are the same or reduced, and our homeless have not increased, I think we've done a pretty good job because the wave is coming. If you look at Folsom, the problems are taking place on Goodwell. It's slowly coming up the hill, and so I want to prevent that. I want to, if in 4 years, I would like to be able to look back and say, we have a better economic development picture. We're more self-sustaining. We've attracted companies to come here. We haven't overbuilt our areas. We've maintained our open spaces. And I can look you in the eye and tell you I did not sell you out on our development in the region. And then better roads, because that's the number one problem. So, thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
So I want to say that I follow the County Board of Supervisors, and I'm on the elected board of an agency that's funded by the County Board of Supervisors. So, we actually report to the board, and I've been introduced before the board. So in terms of my vision, I really want to engage the community in forming a collective vision. As I said at the opening, we have some really smart people in District 1. It's an incredibly intelligent community, and it's been extraordinary to meet the people that I have at the door. People who wrote our CC&R policies. People who wrote the sunshine laws for the state of California. People who work for Caltrans and build bridges. People who are ecologists and educators, and lawyers. The expertise in physicians is deep and rich. And the extraordinary thing about our community is that people bring all of this expertise that they hold and they apply it in volunteer positions and roles in this community, and that's happening right now. We've got incredible institutional memory, if not in the staff per se, where there's a lot of turnover in some departments in the county, but in this community, some of it in this room. So I'd like to see us develop a vision for El Dorado Hills together and do that in an inclusive way and define what success looks like for the next 4 years for the supervisor of District 1 together.
Thank you. Greg, you'll answer this question first. What are your thoughts on the state overriding county land use, health and safety policies, such as the rehab project coming to rescue? What would you do or have you done to support your position?
I think I mentioned earlier that the state is overriding local control, whether it's parental rights in our schools, whether it's affordable housing, or if you look on Deer Valley Road right now, there's the state is mandating to have 2 drug rehab centers built in an extremely rural area of El Dorado Rescue, actually. That area, it's totally irresponsible what they are planning. It's an area that there's no public utilities except electricity. They're on wells, they're on septic, and they're on propane. And the state is mandating to have 2 centers up there, not for patients from El Dorado County, but patients from San Joaquin County. I'm extremely opposed to that. Parental rights. I think parents need to have full knowledge of what their kids are going on in their schools. And as far as affordable housing, we definitely need to increase our affordable housing, but I think locally we should take responsibility for that and do it on our own terms so the state doesn't come in and mandate the housing where we don't want it. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret?
This is an interesting question because, like many of you, I watched what unfolded at the County Board of Supervisors most recently around the clinic. And there was, community groundswell from that community saying that this is not something we want. And the County Board of the supervisor from that region championed that cause. But then a story came out in the paper yesterday or the day before talking about that facility was for Native American teenage moms. And it was supported by the local tribe. And that there was a representation of our community in a light that, not wanting to have that facility in the backyard of that community represented a degree of intolerance. So I think these are complex issues. And as a supervisor, I'm looking forward to examining them in their complexity. We do have a culture on our board where we respond to the angry people in the audience. And sometimes we get led in a direction that maybe it's not the right direction. And those may be difficult things to say in a public meeting when you're facing the crowd. But I do think some of these decisions are more nuanced, and we ought to explore them accordingly.
Thank you. Linda?
So I think the idea of the facility was beneficial, right? It's actually for young women with children, pregnant women across the state actually, so that they could have some tribal housing. I think the concerns from the community were also totally valid because it is about trying to set them up for success. They know the area they live in, and in reality, there just isn't infrastructure effective enough to be able to support them in a safe way. One of the things that I did, I went through the documentation, I found the application that was submitted for it, and I found that there were 3 items that didn't seem to be covered. So they had submitted an application for a grant, said I'm going to do these certain things, 3 of them weren't included. Or as a result, actually wrote into the Board of Supervisors just with that information, just saying, check this out. One of the main things was checking with the fire department. And if you've been on Deer Valley Road, it is a very small, windy road. And trying to get in or out of there would have actually put them potentially in jeopardy. And also, it's a very small fire department with limited resources. So all factors that go into the evaluation of where to put things that the state shouldn't be telling us what to do.
Thank you. Margaret, you'll answer this question first. How will you improve and support services for seniors in El Dorado Hills?
I'm excited to talk about that. I also want to say on the previous question that if we don't decide what we're going to do, and this has to do with the housing element as well, if we don't decide where we're going to put housing, if we don't decide where we're going to put facilities, then the state is going to override local government. So we need to be prepared to make those decisions ourselves, even if it results in us having to have difficult conversations, here at home. I'm a big supporter of seniors and housing for seniors and services for seniors. My father passed away this time last year, and taking care of him really led me to understand the services that there are and the services that there aren't. Thinking about my mother being a widower, even down to how are we going to have dinner tonight? Does Meals on Wheels come to this particular neighborhood? It has made me very sympathetic to the needs of seniors, and I look forward to supporting and working actively with seniors. One of the gifts that my father gave me in his passing is the gift of being able to listen. When you're going to hear those stories for the last time, you listen in a different way. And I enjoy listening to seniors and want to serve them deeply.
Thank you. Linda?
So I think I mentioned my parents earlier. My mother actually has dementia and is in a care home in Phoenix and has been separated from my dad. They were married, they've been married almost 70 years. And my dad's about to turn 95. So definitely something very close to me. One of the things that I brought up earlier was in regards to training facilities in this area. And I think it would be great to be able to have maybe some training options for in-home care services. Because like what Margaret just mentioned, Maybe have somebody come in and hang out with you every once in a while, or help you around the house with something. Just for a little bit, sometimes things like that can be beneficial. But more than that is just, again, the community aspect of it. What can we do all together as a community to be able to serve others? We're all aging. I hate to tell you. I hate to admit it, but we are. And sometimes we don't want to think about it until we're there, and all of a sudden it's a problem. So let's talk to each other. Let's find ways to plan ahead. Let's connect together. Let's spend time with each other. And then maybe we can come up with the things that we decide that might be lacking in our area. And then we want to spend time and effort focusing on it.
Thank you. Greg?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, seniors, it's our fastest growing population. And like Linda said, we're all going to have needs eventually. But those needs are going to differ depending on who you are and your health. I think the first thing we need to do is listen to the needs. And just a couple weeks ago, I visited two of our senior centers in El Dorado Hills. I visited Oakmont and El Dorado Hills Senior Center and spoke to over 100 senior residents there, and obviously introduced myself, but I wanted to listen to what their needs were. And overwhelmingly, it was public safety and transportation issues for them. And as I look at my dad, my parents back there, and, my dad's in his early 80s, and he doesn't like to drive at night. And so I get the transportation part. And so maybe the county already provides a limited number of transportation services for seniors, but maybe we expand that. The county also provides about 20 resources that are on the website, on the county website, that the county currently offers. And so I think it's important for us as a society to inform those seniors of what type of services are available. Whether if they have nutritional needs or need legal advice, or you mentioned earlier, people that are alone, there's actually a service for people. It's called You're Not Alone. You can call and get comfort and talk to people on the phone. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions tonight, so we're going to be heading into our closing statements. We'll be starting with Linda. So Linda, you have 2 minutes to make your closing remarks.
Thank you all for coming tonight. It was really nice to see so many people out here and have the chance to be able to speak to you, answer questions, things like that. As we go forward to voting, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to stand up and participate and be an option. The only reason I'm running is for you. That is the only agenda I have, is to try to be a voice for the people. I've been in that space where I feel like I'm not heard, or I feel like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming, there's so much going on, how do I even keep track of it? I decided to step up because I think I can help with that. And together I know that we can make good changes and positive changes for our area. We can be aware of the stuff that's going on, so it's not a surprise to us. We can reconnect with each other, and we can reconnect with our government, and make sure that somebody's listening, and somebody's doing, and somebody's actually acting on your behalf. You are all important, and I appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Greg, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, thank you all for attending. It's getting late, and thank the League for hosting. Appreciate it. As you can tell by my public speaking style, I'm not a politician, and I'm truly not a politician. I don't look at this as a stepping stone for our higher office. I don't have any ulterior motives, and I do not have a secret agenda. I'm doing this for one reason, and one reason only: to keep El Dorado County a great place to live. And it is a great place. I've been walking neighborhoods for the last 7 months, and we've reached over 8,500 homes. And I've introduced myself to you, and I've heard from you about what your needs are, and I'm committed to representing you in a nonpartisan fashion. I'm the only candidate up here without a full-time job, and I'm committed to doing this full-time or for whatever time commitment it takes. If you look at my endorsements, I'm very proud of them. I have our sheriff and the 2 prior sheriffs, our district attorney, Deputy Sheriff's Association. I've got all the law enforcement in our county behind me. I've got fire chiefs behind me. I've got business owners behind me, school board members behind me, and friends. And these people, most of them I knew before I was even running. I've had relationships with these people, and they trust me. And you voted for a lot of these people. You trust them, and they trusted me. I have proven leadership experience with the California Highway Patrol. I ran large organizations with the CHP and statewide programs. And I've got the discipline and the temperament to do the job. I want to keep this place great, and I would be honored to serve you, and I ask for your vote on March 5th or before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Margaret, you have 2 minutes to make your closing statement.
I want to invite you to get involved in our campaign. Our campaign has momentum. Our campaign is optimistic. Our campaign is about the art of the possible. We are at an inflection point in our community where now is the time for us to convene together and define the vision for the future for El Dorado Hills. And I want to engage the good people of El Dorado Hills that are so bright and so on the ball to be a part of that visioning for the future. I bring a skill set that involves strong fiscal management because I lead a complex organization, and I've always, as the leader of the organization where I am now, participated civically on big boards. Boards such as the California State University Board of Trustees, which is a $12 billion budget, and I was the fiduciary of that budget. I know that I can bring the type of fiscal management in a time that is going to be a difficult time in California as we face budget cuts. And budget cuts typically impact schools and counties the most. I've led organizations through complex and difficult fiscal times. I'm currently the only candidate who's already elected to a part of this county's leadership on the El Dorado County Resource Conservation District Board. And so I want to help us do something that's imperative, which is wildfire prevention and address our insurance issues here in this county that impact us here in El Dorado Hills. And in my first 100 days, I will work on improving the communication infrastructure. There's so much that I hear at the door about what people didn't know or felt surprised by. And so an important part of what I will do is put the communications infrastructure in place, and I hope you vote for me on March 5th.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our audience for coming tonight. That's the most number of questions we've had at any of our forums, so thank you very much. Also, thank you to our candidates for being here today, and a reminder... Get those facts before you vote by visiting votersedge.org today. Your vote is your voice. Make sure you get out and vote this election day.